Oh, the gathering storm of self-identity. This is the first of 3 10-minute deep dive vlogs to give some basic descriptions of the many concepts pulled together to understand self-identity. And as you will see, I've visualized self-identity as stormy. My squiggles are tornadoes of life energy. Life is full of storms, but human development truly relies on challenges and problem solving, as long as we're not alone in the struggle. So the dynamic processes I attempt to draw for you are invisible, yet they exert forces for change over an entire lifetime. Capturing the lifetime trajectory of self-identity starts before your beginning, before birth, when genetics rolls the dice. So I'll just pare this infographic down a little bit. We each begin from a single cell. So each part of our body is actually every part of our body. Yes, every new cell is dependent on the cells coming before, even generations before. So we are literally of our mother's cells and our father's cells and our grandparents and great-grandparents and ancient family members that contribute unknowingly to the self-identity of you and me and future generations. Genetics is a divine evolutional design. In fact, the developing fetus is a miracle of complexity, evolved from thousands of generations, which some believe must be a series of divine miracles. The human body is a miracle of self-healing, self-regulating, self-protecting, self-awareness, and self-identity, equipped to handle stress. Positive stress exercises responses built into how the body functions. Tolerable stress stretches the capacity to manage more stress as we grow in age, and toxic stress can do damage to any of the 4 natural adaptations the central nervous system uses, which are changes in heart rate, changes in blood pressure, changes in inflammation, and changes in blood sugar. So instead of responding to stress, these adaptations can actually get stuck in disorders like hypertension, immune diseases, and diabetes. When we struggle with less than robustly healthy central nervous systems, this affects our mental health, our physical health, and our self-identity to fully show up in the world and participate. And this is why all of us, especially the unborn children around us and the pregnant women in our community, need protection from toxic substances and toxic situations, since both will affect the young children and unborn babies. The gathering storm of self-identity actually begins before birth, when the central nervous system is growing. So the developing brain is a bundle of neurology. Neural connections, actually, they're like electrical wiring for moving synapses, accommodating thoughts and memories. Dr. Perry says the brain develops neurosequentially in a sequence for elegant and efficient connection. Dr. Perry is a senior fellow at the Houston Child Trauma Academy, a professor of medicine in Chicago, and a senior advisor to the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative. Dr. Perry has discovered the dosing effect of toxins on the brain, being significant in 2 ways: the amount of toxins and the timing of doses, which damage whatever cells are developing at that specific time. So for example, alcohol is a known toxin. So binge doses or chronic doses are damaging to those cells and structures which are actively growing when doses occur. Also, life chaos is a toxin, which might occur as a natural disaster like a hurricane, a forest fire, or a flood, which the family survives. But also chronic doses of toxic stress result when rescue operations take too long, food supply is cut off, water is not safe to drink, or family members are lost. Dr. Perry has identified the key systems and areas of the brain which are impacted by adversity during early development, and his surprising diagnostic tools are interviews and questionnaires, basically asking, what happened to you? Asking this question of families uncovers the details of why a person's mental or physical health is suffering. His purpose is to create therapy plans by designing enriched environments for neural development and educational activities to further engage neuroplasticity. Dr. Perry's work on brain architecture explains that the brain develops from the inside out and the bottom up, but also gives us confidence that the central nervous system can heal because it continues to change through neural development and neuroplasticity. The gathering storm of my self-identity began generations ago, passed on through the central nervous system and brain architecture, but also the brain and body continues growing and changing after birth. How my body and brain functions is foundational in many ways to how I can understand myself and expand into a self-identity. So I want to introduce a bit about the 4 layers that Dr. Perry refers to in his upside down triangle representation of brain architecture. At the bottom, disruption to the growing brainstem impacts the autonomic functions of the central nervous system. This means the senses, digestion, maybe respiration, heart functioning, and reflexes like vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing. The next layer of brain architecture is the Diacephalon, in charge of hormones, sorting out sensory and motor signals, and even sleep cycles. The limbic system is next. This is the relational brain, and damage to the limbic system looks like behavioral and emotional overreacting. This is impulsive thinking, talking, and behaving, but also can be underreacting. So kids will tend to be chronically withdrawn, anxious and fearful, and this looks like part of their personality. And last, there are several layers of the neocortex covered by the cortex. This is the thinking brain and is essentially the database of sensory perceptions, memory, spatial awareness, auditory input, and literacy. Brain architecture is use dependent. So we are safeguarded by neuroplasticity, allowing our brain to change and develop throughout life, at least as long as we continue to use our brain. Our social life exercises brain plasticity, and problem solving creates brain power. The gathering storm of self-identity gains momentum from generations of culture, social life, and family life. In fact, most of us are in touch with 7 generations of bloodlines. If we've heard stories about our great-grandparents and our grandparents. Plus, at my age now, I can see forward 3 generations, from my daughter and her cousins to their children, and just recently a great-grandson. Indigenous philosophy is very clever to consider how decisions and values that we hold today will affect the 7 generations, the next seven generations to come. Because on average, 7 generations can actually be alive at the same time. That's an entire bloodline. And why is this significant? Because self-identity borrows from the embedded norms and values in the circumstances and stories of generations past. Stories of courage and accomplishments powerfully influence our confidence and convictions to live well. Family stories of disasters, disease, and social injustice instruct future generations how to cope. History and her story are always set in very specific social and cultural contexts. Because we are born into an ethnic culture, a socially defined class, and a precise geographic location. So like Richard Wagamy says, we are born into relation with all things. So this includes climate that feels right to me, landscape that is familiar, technology I grew up using, and also the state of the environment that I inherit, and shifting political or economic realities affecting my lifestyle and my life opportunities. My starting point is different than yours, simply because of which decade we were each born in. So if you are a millennial, born 1981 to 1995, you were born riding the wave of Pac-Man and word processing. Generation Z was born swimming in digital social media. And Generation Alpha is all about expanded awareness and innovations to heal the planet. Approximately every 10 years, the cultural tools that we grow up with will change or morph, shaping our knowledge, skills, aptitudes, and attitudes. Like my great-grandparents' tools were farmland, horses, and lumber. My grandparents' tools were bricks, mortar, and electricity. My parents' tools, I would say, were reading and job training, and my tools have been computers and travel. My daughter's tools are cell phones and digital resources. So you get the idea. We will keep using whichever tools are flexible enough to morph and remain useful. But new cultural tools will always expand our self-identity.